Welcome and thank you for joining us. As we begin today's event, I would like to acknowledge that Dalhousie University is located in Mi'kma'ki, which is the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq. We are all treaty people. We also recognize that African Nova Scotians are a distinct people whose histories, legacies, and contributions have enriched that part of Mi'kma'ki, which is known as Nova Scotia, for over 400 years. It is my great pleasure to host today's event, and I am pleased to welcome alumni, friends, and others joining the conversation. My name is Deep Saini, and I have the honor of serving as Dalhousie's 12th President and Vice Chancellor. I took up this position in January 2020, and soon after, COVID-19 made its appearance. So, the past 2 years have been truly unprecedented. I would like to express my sincere thanks for the exceptional support that we have received. It is clear to me that Dalhousie has a strong network of friends and supporters without whom our success would not be possible. This network extends around the globe with close to 150,000 alumni who are living in more than 150 countries. Thank you all for your help and encouragement during these particularly challenging circumstances and, of course, beyond. Dalhousie has been around for over 200 years, and during this period, we have evolved to include new faculties, new departments, and new campuses. Yet, for all our growth, we remain a community united by the shared pride in what we achieve together and what we give back to the world around us. Last year, we launched Dalhousie's new strategic plan, which is titled Third Century Promise. This plan was informed by extensive engagement with our communities, and it will shape our collective path forward. It is a promise of collective ambition, of community and support, and of the long-term positive impact Dalhousie will have on Nova Scotia, Canada, and the world. I look forward to working with you all to write the next chapter of Dalhousie's compelling story. With your help, we will raise our ambitions boldly higher and take this great university to the next level. I am delighted to be joined today by a highly accomplished co-panelist. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Ajit Roy. Ajit is the executive chairman of Suprajit Group, an entrepreneurial adventure that began in 1984 when he returned to India after completing his master studies in applied science from the Technical University of Nova Scotia, which you know, of course, is now part of Dalhousie University. Today, Suprajit Group is a global leader in the automotive cable and halogen bulb industry, with manufacturing bases in India, the UK, the US, and Mexico, and employs more than 5,000 people around the world. With the success of Suprajit Group, Ajit has been able to make a difference in the lives of those who need that kind of help most, and he's done this through his own contributions and those of the Suprajit Foundation, which is a trust that manages Suprajit's corporate social responsibility activities. Together, among other initiatives, they have provided scholarships for over 700 Indian students, lunches to hundreds of school children, and are maintaining a hospice for patients with late-stage cancer. Ajit also established the Eldon Gunn Memorial Scholarship at Dalhousie University, which is named after the late professor who supervised and mentored Ajit during his graduate studies here. Ajit is also one of the newest members of the Dalhousie Advisory Council, and he has joined this council just last month. Ajit, welcome, a very warm welcome to you. It's so nice to meet you. You and I have met only virtually like this, and I look forward to the pleasure of meeting you in person, hopefully this year sometime when we visit Bangalore, where you are located. The conversation that we are about to begin will be focused on leadership, what it means to be a leader, how experiences can help us to leverage and strengthen our leadership styles, and how to emerge from challenging circumstances in a stronger position than when, than when we entered them. So let's get started. Ajit, at the very best of times, let alone in the kind of challenging circumstances that we have been living through, leadership roles can be very stressful, they can be challenging, and yet they are, of course, in my view, always rewarding. In my experience, we have when we go through these challenges as leaders, we also learn the most about ourselves when we need to stretch and to adapt. So let me begin this conversation by asking you a question that you, of course, have led a large company with multiple operations through these very challenging times. And what has this experience taught you about yourself personally and professionally?
Good morning, Deep. First of all, let me thank you for inviting me on this coffee chat. It's been a pleasure to have come, talked to you in the earlier occasions as well. And it's a proud moment to be part here and also to be part of the DAL Advisory Committee that you so kindly invited me. I mean, I would start by saying that leadership sort of develops over a period of time. When I look back my 35, 38 years of running my own business, and when I came back, I was a complete novice. And what I learned over a period of time, it's a learning experience. I think we learn by what we do, what we understand, what we get to know, what we try to overcome in our business environment. So I think the leadership qualities and experiences sort of develop over a period of time and strengthens ourselves. And I think in that long journey, there are a few things that I learned as my own experiences, I would say. The most important thing that I would say today is that the leader has to lead by example. We need to set standards which we should stand up to ourselves first before we can expect our team to stand up to it. So leading by example, knowing what we are doing and letting people know this is how we are running the business so that everybody is on the same page. I think that's something that I learned in the very early stages of my leadership development, which made the team to be a part of us so that we always worked as a team together. And it became bigger and bigger. I think the same challenges of leading by example probably has sort of imbibed, in me, I would say. I think second important, when you're if it's a very small enterprise, you are the boss, you are doing everything, there are few people with you, then it's fine that you do everything. But as the organization grows, I think, we cannot be everywhere every time. So it's important to develop a team whom you can trust. I think it is very important that once the team realizes that you trust them, I think they also develop that responsibility that they need to deliver on the trust that we have reposed on the team. Again, I would say a value system to be, done in the organization, which you should lead that. And, we felt that over a period of time, we have a value system which we are proud of in terms of what we do, how we treat people. These are the experiences which made me to feel that, today we have in our organization people who have been with me from day one. There are people who have been with me 35, 40 years, and they stand by the organization. I don't have to worry. I can trust them. Being available for people, being dependable in terms of my time, my inputs, I think they're as important as anything else. I would also think that listening to people is something that I learned. I think initially I was very young and brash probably, but with time I realized that I'm not the only expert in town and I'm not the only expert in the room. So I need to listen to people. I think that is today, I think something that I have learned, that listening to people and understanding their side of the view makes a decision making more comprehensive and all encompassing. I think there's another thing. And the last thing, I think, again, I'll probably talk about Eldon Gun you just mentioned some again later on, I suppose, in this conversation. One of the things that I learned in Halifax, actually, at Tons, is the rational thinking, because everything that we did was rational, I would say, and that has helped me in my journey as a big experience as we look at issues from a very rational perspective. And going out of the comfort zone, I think there is another experience that I learned. I think I could have remain a small, entrepreneur in my little town in Bangalore, but to go out of that little comfort zone also is a big leadership skill that we should feel that we have in us, in our team, the ability to go out of our comfort zone. And of course, the pandemic has taught me that we need to be a lot more compassionate. I think life has been difficult to many people, particularly in countries like us, developing countries. And I think it's important to be compassionate. Then we are lucky ones, and we need to, give our lending hand to the people in need. I think these are some of the experiences that I've learned, I think, during, these 40 years of my, trying to be a leader, I guess.
Lot of very deep thoughts there, Ajit. When you were listing some of the key drivers of your leadership, my thoughts went to a book that I recently finished reading. The book is titled Trust, 20 Ways to Build a Better Country. It's written by David Johnston, the gentleman who's just 2 years ago finished as Canada's Governor General, and he was formerly president of University of Waterloo, and my boss at that point, actually. And he lists 20 qualities that are critical for leadership and for building a country. And I would very strongly recommend that book to anybody who's listening or watching, and to you as well, if you haven't heard of the book, if you can get a copy of that. It's actually a fantastic book, written by a person who is kind of larger than life here in Canada, in terms of his intellectual stature in this country. Speaking of David Johnston brings me to the thought of, that leaders are, there may be some leaders who are born, but there are leaders who are, most leaders are made through experiences, and often through mentoring and experiences that we encounter early on in life, and people who inspire us and so on. And in all our lives, there are people who have inspired us and shaped us into who we are. I can cite a number of people who have been who have played that role in my own, formation. Tell me, who are the people who have had those formative influences on you, who have inspired you, and whose inspiration you have carried forward into your own actions?
Thank you, Deep. I think this is some question which is frankly, very dear to my heart. Some of the people who have made huge impact in my life through the years. I think I've got few, but at least I would like to speak about two of them at least. One is my own father, actually. Just to give the background of myself beyond what he gave as an introduction. I'm from a small little village in India where poverty was all pervasive, and my father used to be a small-time, medical practitioner, and he was a huge role model not only to me, for the entire town, because he was the only doctor in little. It's not the Western doctor; it's the local doctor, really speaking. And he had a huge value system. He was a social reformer, and as we were growing up, we saw what he was doing for the local population and how he was trying to help them out. And we were not rich, actually. We were, truly the lower middle class family in our town. And the trouble and, the trials that he had to put us through, we are 4 children, to put us through our education, the amount of difficulty he has to finance us. At the same time, he wouldn't let go of his social responsibilities. He wanted to do that part of it also. And, those struggles actually gave us a lot of insight into the value system. I think those things have stood the test of time for me and even for our family. So that, whatever we are today, we feel that, that small beginning has helped us to shape what we are. He was strictly to, discipline. I would like to go to the extent of give an example. we had a little, land where we used to stay, and the neighbor's guava tree had, fantastic fruits that was coming up, and I remember I and my brother climbing the tree and enjoying a guava fruit of the neighbor, and I go and behold my father standing next to us with his stick in his hand, saying that you you should find happiness in what you have and what you do, not the neighbors. And we got a little bit of a whack on our back on that day, but those things actually, it's not the whack. I think that what he said to me that day, it's they're all very deep values to us. I think that's one, and I think on the second hand, on the second person, very much is Eldon Gunn. When I first came to Halifax, I was it's like a culture shock to me. I was coming from India. I had never touched a computer in those days, and I come and do my graduate studies, everything on computer. We are connected to the DAL mainframe, and we are doing, Fortran programming and COBOL programming, and I didn't know what it was. It was zilch, my knowledge was. But Eldon had faith in me. I think he challenged me. He was one of the toughest professors I have seen in my lifetime, but he was also the fairest guy. And he extracted the best from every student, not just me. He was a young professor coming from U of T, I think, in those days. In mathematics, he was highly mathematical. And frankly, I didn't understand half of it when I started. But he made sure that he gave the confidence to me, saying that you are as good as any. It is just that you need to put your head down and do what is required. And the amount of mentoring, help and advice and guidance he gave. I mean, actually, I think that, I sort of became from a boy to a man in Halifax, really speaking, with this guidance. It has changed me so significantly that today, the ability to think rationality and get into the nitty-gritties of a problem, I think I learned in Halifax whenever we were solving a problem. And one of the biggest compliments, I'm still, going back to 1984 after I presented my thesis for my master's. I mean, he's very difficult to give a good compliment. He's a tough guy. He wouldn't give an easy compliment to you. And after my master thesis was very successfully defended, the next day he calls me to his room and tells me, Ajit, if you've done a little more work, I would have probably given you a PhD for the work you've done. That spoke volumes of, the kind of work he did to get that out from me. So it was a great experience. I think these are the two people I would like to talk about. Now, of course, in our business, generally, there are a lot of business leaders. I look at leaders who have a compassionate outlook in life. I'm from an Indian context. I would talk about the Tatas. They've got they're the huge empire, but all the money goes to the trusts that own these companies, and they're all spent on social reforms in India and elsewhere in the world. And similarly, when I look at a Western leader, people like Warren Buffett, today, most of the wealth is given away for charitable causes. We are all, fortunate to be where we are. I think giving back to society is an essential part. I think that's where I think I'll stop.
Yeah, and you're doing a great job of that yourself. What you give back to the society around you. I chuckled when I heard Fortran mentioned. This is after decades that I've heard somebody mention Fortran, and
that is the only language. That is a mathematical language in those days, right?
That's right. My own introduction to computer programming started with Fortran, and I'm actually very grateful that Fortran does not exist anymore, or at least doesn't exist as an active language anymore in modern.
I know.
Programming. Yes. But it's interesting what you shared with us. Your father and your master's degree supervisor. And if I were to talk about my top mentors, it would be exactly those two people. Except that the second one would be, a combination of my master's supervisor and my PhD supervisor in Australia. And it's amazing how those early influences can shape the rest of your life as a professional, but also the value system. Now, of course, we draw inspiration from people that we meet, people who influence us, people who mentor us, but we also draw lessons from our experiences what we encounter as we go through early steps and then build iteratively on those steps to the next step and so on. Would you like to share one or two of your experiences through your career and life that you feel prepared you to manage through the ups and downs of last 2 years, which I can only imagine. India went through something close to hell for one period, for one phase when there was such a huge surge of COVID-19 in India, and to manage multinational operations that you manage under those circumstances must have been something incredible. So what was it in your background that got you ready for effective management during these, and effective leadership during these periods?
The COVID has been a phenomenal challenge. Nobody expected it to hit so hard, and we are not used to it. It's completely, it's a black swan event for all I can say. So it is completely, took us by total shock and surprise. And we didn't know how to deal with it because, of course, we knew it was happening, and it came to India, 3-4 months later, and India went into a complete lockdown. And what happens when lockdown happens is that there is a huge migration of people in an organization like us, where in India we have nearly 7,000 people working, and a lot of them are not from the local area. They're all from outside of the local area. So they all go back to their towns. And they've got nothing to really, eat, if I may use the word, because, if you don't get your salaries, you can't get your food. I mean, that's as simple as that. So what I learned in those few months is that it's important to keep the morale of the team up. It's important to keep the confidence of people up. It was important for us as leaders to be patient because it's something not in our hands. I don't know how to deal with it, but I know that it may be that we thought that it will be a year or 6 months, but eventually it has become more than 2 years today. But we kept saying that let us be patient, let us see what best we can do, let us keep moving on. Perseverance was the very important, I would say, characteristic that we all wanted to tell our people, that persevere. It should be okay. We will go through this difficult time. I think those are the few of the things that I can sort of think back and say that has made us to sustain and survive the crisis. Now I think it's still on, but I suppose it is less severe today than what it was. So I guess there are some of the remarks that I can say.
Interesting. My thoughts go back to about 11th or 12th of March 2020, when we suspected that there was a case of COVID-19 in one of our student residences here. It's a large residence, and and we have to take our minds back to the March of 2020, when hearing about somebody getting COVID was much scarier than it is today. With today we know much more about the virus. We know, we have quite extensive vaccination, at least in Canada here, and there are even antiviral drugs on the market and so on. And the processes for dealing with COVID are much more sophisticated today than they were 2 years ago. But imagine now, you hearing about a case of COVID-19, which mercifully turned out to be a false alarm. But at that point, we didn't know it was a false alarm. The symptoms were all there. And the image in my mind at that moment was, we have about 30,000 people here, students and faculty and staff. And that I was thinking about Dalhousie as a stationary cruise ship, right? And it was like a highly active petri plate of infection. And this student was using common showers, common bathrooms. They were dining in the dining hall and so on, in the buffets, etc. So you can imagine the exposure that could have happened. And so we decided to close the university on the 13th of March, empty the residences, acted very swiftly. Although the case turned out to be false, but it was actually a right decision because soon after that, COVID did arrive in Nova Scotia. But that was the time when it was like, you were trying to deal with a burning building, and you were trying to just save people in whatever way you can, and you put many of the processes to the side. Just it was like throwing people out of the window just to save their lives. So even if they get scratched or perhaps break a limb or something, at least you've saved their life. Then from there, we slowly learned from that experience, got into this steady state, which has been kind of up and down steady state in some ways. With Until recently, it didn't seem like that there was an end date to this, and we learned to manage the university through that period, and I think we did quite well. But always in the back of our minds, after the initial crisis management for the first maybe 3 to 6 months, the thoughts pivoted to that someday, somehow, this will end. And at that point, we still have a university that would aspire to have a global impact as we do. And what it is that we need to do now to get ourselves ready for that time in the future when more normal times return, perhaps in a new way, but they will return. And we've been busy working on that, and I have my own thoughts on what needed to be done, and we've done it. From your perspective, from a business leader's perspective, what were you busy doing preparing for that future post-pandemic?
First of all, we knew that it has to end at some point. I mean, it's not that these things are forever. So also as entrepreneurs, we are perennially optimistic. So we always look at the positive side of life, and that what next after this pandemic is over. One thing is for sure, when the pandemic is over, the world the economic growth in the world will have to expand fairly significantly. For the simple reason, for the last 2-3 years, there has been a huge, I would say, people would be scared to spend money. They are careful about what they are doing. They are saving whatever little they can. But once these things are go away, there will be an economic growth of significant size and in terms of percentages. So manufacturers like us, people who are in the automotive world, think that last 2 years we had 10% degrowth of business every year in the automotive business. In the next 3-5 years, there will be a different stage of growth. How do we deal with the growth? So the challenges become that how do we suddenly focus ourselves from managing pandemic to managing growth? Now that is a different, managing pandemic is how to, in our organizations, unfortunately, we had deaths. We are talking about one case in Dalhousie. In our organization, we had multiple deaths thanks to COVID. How do we deal with the situation? That was a different way of how to deal with a business scenario. But the next business scenario, when the business is flourishing, is to how to grow the business. So that would be a more interesting challenge to do. I think it is something that we are all looking forward to. But I suppose we are all preparing today. I mean, companies like us are preparing ourselves, investing ourselves in how we should be spending capital expenditure for the next 3 to 5 years to take on those growth. So that's an exciting part of business as well.
So that's the business end of it, but there is also the people end of it, with regard to leadership and the trust and so on. What have we learned from this experience that in your world that you think would be the defining features of what we take forward to the next phase in terms of the leadership and trust? Those are the two things that bear heavy on my mind these days. Any thoughts on that?
I think trust is something is very essential for growing particularly an organization where there are multiple locations of business. Business is done not just in India. We're a global company today. The teams are working in multiple continents, multiple countries. The ability to develop a system where the teams in these local areas, wherever they are spread in the world, have an autonomy to run the businesses based on certain checks and balances, and set challenging targets. I think they are very important for us, so that we are multicultural, location, multi-geography. The cultures are different. How do we integrate people across the world? Recently, we did a large acquisition, which takes us to another few countries in the process. So the point is how to understand the nuances of doing business in some of these geographies. Those are the challenges that we face, I think, as we go forward.
I'm tempted to share one of my own takeaways from this experience here in our world, which is, in some ways is similar to yours, some ways it's different. Our business is primarily people. That's what we everything at the university is about people. And, when we got into the pandemic, we did a lot of modeling about what could happen to the finances of the university, what could happen to our enrollment. Some models were showing us maybe potentially up to a 30% decline in our enrollment, which would have decimated the university financially. And much of that decline would have been on the international side. So, and we have large percentage of international students, so that would have been unsustainable for the university. But we made an early decision that we are not going to make decisions based on the finances of the university or other business considerations, but the first consideration we will have, and this was a decision made by the administration with the blessing of the board, that our first approach to everything would be the health and wellness of our people. It's going to be a people first approach, and every decision we make, we will first think about what does it do to our people, and then everything else will work. And very interestingly, everything else did work out. Our enrollment actually went up. This is the first time I was so pleased that our modeling was wrong. that not only we did not have 30% decline in enrollment, we had about a 5% increase in our enrollment, including international enrollment. And I think that a value-based decision making, in fact, I think inspired our students too. So many of our international students who enrolled, they stayed with the university, they paid the tuition, they continue to get their education, and they have been slowly coming as the conditions have been getting better. They're showing up on the campus slowly. Every day I meet people who say, well, I've been enrolled for a year, but I have just arrived at Dalhousie now last month. And it's been heartwarming to see that people, how well people have responded, and they have actually, their actions have saved the university from a financial decline because they also latched on to those human values that we started off with. So it was an interesting lesson for me personally, how important a value-based decision-making system is compared to just simply a business consideration decision.
I have an example too on that. I mean, when the pandemic hit last year, when we were sort of shut down for 3 months, the entire country was shut down for almost 3 months. And we have a fairly large, what I would call as casual or outsourced workplaces. People who are on our roles many companies couldn't afford or didn't want to, but we paid every employee their full salary during this pandemic times. Now that was the biggest confidence booster for our employees, saying that there is a company which stood by us in these difficult times. But it's not just for our employees. We also employ casual workers who are outsourced to a third party. And what we did that, those people are the lowest strata of what we need as people, the people at the lowest level, unskilled people. What we did was we all gave them every month ration kits, which was enough for them to survive those crises. Today, this is the population which sort of circulates, and, people come and go in that, people go somewhere else, they come and, there's a lot of floating population there. The fact that we gave that ration kits every month for them to survive, today they don't leave us. So we have that committed workforce who stand by us because we stood by them when they were in trouble, which very few, companies did. But we were able to say that, look, we are taking care of you.
That is, both admirable and brilliant in terms of even as a management strategy. It's brilliant, but it's also, of course, it's admirable that it starts in a value rather than just simply a business consideration. Now we are soon going to open it up for questions from those who are listening and watching. So if you are among our audience, please join the conversation. Post your questions for either one of us or both, and we will like to engage in a conversation with you. And to give you a little bit of time, let me ask my last question to Ajit, and then we'll open it up for that conversation. But in the meantime, please start posting your questions. Ajit, it's see, knowledge is one quantity that not only does not diminish when you share it, it actually expands. This is the beauty of knowledge. In my view, there are only two quantities like that actually expand when you share them: knowledge and love. And so let me ask you. I mean, this has been a fantastic learning experience for people like you. There are leaders out there who may not be at the right stage at this point, but they are progressing towards that sort of a position where in the next time, whenever a next crisis arises, and crises always do come for organizations and businesses, they will have to face what you did. If you were to leave one or two lessons that are personal, but you think they could be helpful to those who are going to be facing the next crisis in their organizations, would you like to share those one or two lessons?
I'm sure all the audience are leaders by themselves and by their own strength and in their respective businesses. I would say some of the things that I learned during the crisis, not just pandemic, and also there has been crisis in the past, the financial meltdown in 2008-9, and so many of them. I mean, it's important to be always positive, have a positive outlook. We can look at, glass filled with water as half full or half empty. I mean, I guess as an entrepreneur, I always think of it as half full. How can I make it full? I mean, that's the way I look at life. And, whatever the difficult times we have, we need to, I would start with a little bit of a lighter vein. I like the Scotch, the Johnny Walker advertisement, which says that just keep walking.
Keep walking.
So I think it has got a very profound meaning even in business scenario. I think come rain, thunder, whatever, snow in your part of the world, you just keep walking, you just keep moving. I think you should be thinking positive because, and again, the famous saying is, the tough times don't last, but tough people last long. So I think, and persevere. There is always light. I think, we need to keep moving and keep doing what we are doing. And as long as you're confident, as long as I'm confident what I'm doing is right, I know I will win. So I think that's the way I look at life.
Great lesson, and I would throw in one of mine that has served me well through life, and it's not just a lesson through this time. Actually, although it got tested very well through this, it was when 1996 when I was appointed to my first administrative position at University of Montreal. That was the first time for me, and my PhD supervisor was an accomplished administrator in Australia. So I called him first to share my joy with him that I have this position, and then to ask him for advice. So his name was Don Espinal. I said, Don, what would be one piece of advice you'll give to a newbie? And he said, Deep, and he didn't think long. He said, Deep, I will only say that surround yourself with the brightest people you can find and empower them. And you repeated that early on when you said, it is, leadership is a team sport. It's not,
yes.
Leadership is not about individual heroics, and the sooner you get over that idea that it's about individual heroics, the better off you're going to be as a leader. And I think that has served me exceptionally well throughout my career, and particularly during this pandemic, where I'm surrounded by some amazing people who have made the job so much easier. So with that, let me go to the first question I have. I don't have in front of me the name of the person who asked this question because I'm just reading from the prompts here. So forgive me. But the question is, what was the hardest leadership decision you have had to make throughout your career, and how did you come to that decision? And apologies because I don't know who the first person asking the question is, but it's a great question. So, what was the hardest leadership decision you have had to make throughout your career, and how did you come to that decision? Would you like to take a stab at it, Ajit?
Sure. I mean, it's during the business career, I would say that we had multiple hard decisions to take. I was a small entrepreneur trying to grow my business, one customer, one product, one location. From there to go into multi-location, multi-customer, beyond India, globally, through acquisition, through organic growth. In terms of business decisions, each one of them was unique and was challenging. But when I look back 40 years, I mean, I'll go beyond my business and look back 40 years and think that what is the toughest decision I have taken in my life. I think they're not the business decision that I have taken. I think the toughest decision I took was the decision I decided post my master's at Tans. I had an opportunity to sort of do my PhD with Eldon himself. But Eldon told me, go to Waterloo. There is one Professor John Bazakat. I don't really know whether where he is now. But he said he's a great in management science. Do your PhD. There'll be great opportunities in academics or whatever it is. And then another friend of mine sitting in California said that, Ajit, come down to California. I'll get you a job, settle down. In those days, 9 out of 10, I would say 95 out of 100 students went out of India. I think they never came back. I mean, the idea was to study, relocate, you yourself is an example, great example of it. But I was one of those very few who said that I want to go back home. I think it was one of the toughest decisions to take. Nearly 2-3 months I was debating, discussing, talking to Eldon, talking to everybody else, saying that, I want to go back home and start something. In those days, back in 80s, there was hardly anything that I could do in India because the reform started only in the 90s by Dr. Manmohan Singh. And to take that decision to go back and start a small little enterprise of my own, whereas I had never had an experience set up an industry or whatever it is. Looking back, it was the hardest decision, but at the same time, I would say most fulfilling and most satisfying decision that I've taken in my life. So I would say that was the hardest one.
It's very interesting you should say that. I a very similar moment in my life. It was in the opposite direction. When I finished my master's degree in India, I had a fantastic job with Glaxo chemical company and admission to PhD. And that was the hardest decision, I would say, in my career. That was the toughest decision that I had to make to leave India. I had no intention of living abroad, until I actually, perhaps 10 years after I left India. It's only then that I started thinking of settling here. So that was a tough decision, where to give up a great job and go into this unknown of doing a PhD and didn't quite have an idea of what lies behind. So similar experience. One of the things that I like to share with our friends online is that, I spoke about teams, surrounding yourself with strong people and empowering them. There is the flip side of that in management, that every now and then you find that in your team, around your, in your close circle, you have someone who is not quite up to the scratch for that job. That often happens. And it has happened to me a few times, where you come across that situation. And that is a very tough decision. You've done everything you can to bring that person up to the level where they could perform to the benefit of the organization. And you feel that is not sufficient and it can't be improved any further. And you have to make a very tough decision of letting go of that person. That I would personally, I have found those moments have been the toughest for me, because you are thinking about what is best for the organization, but that person has their job on the line. And to make that decision is a very, very hard decision, but it's also very important to make that decision, because your ultimate responsibility is to do the best for the organization, not what feels good to you, and to overcome that fear, overcome that melancholy of having to make a decision that impacts somebody's life and career. Is the critical thing. And I've seen that when I've made those decisions, mercifully only on a few occasions, the person at the receiving end of that decision has actually also done better because they also have been relieved from that difficult situation, and they have found a better path in their career and flourished in some cases. So that's part of decision making. There was another question. So you're looking at advice to students post pandemic. So this is actually, no, there's another question. Can you please put that back on? Yeah. It's from Pemberton Cyrus. If I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, sir, and if I'm not, my sincerest apologies. It's a question for Ajit. It is great to see you again. Your workers stayed with you because your policies during the pandemic. Because of your policy during the pandemic, what was the overall financial benefit of having a stable workforce?
Hi, Pemberton. It's nice to hear you. Virtually at least connect with you. By the way, for the audience and for Deep, Pemberton and I did our masters together, and we're in the same department. And he's I think, when I came last time, he was the deputy dean of engineering studies as well. Thank you for the question, Pemberton. I think what has helped is the commitment of the people. The fact that we looked after them during the difficult times, and they stood by us during the times when it's back to normal. What the true advantage of stable workforce is the increased efficiencies. If a team of people working on a particular, let's say, operating line, a production line, are producing, let us say, in my business, let's say 100 cables per hour. And if it's the same stable team is there, they continue to produce 100 or probably improve the efficiency to 110. But if you don't have that stable workforce, if there's somebody new comes, and if that 1 out of the 10 workforce is a new one, and he slows down the other 9 too. So it's important to have the stable workforce to get the production efficiency and probably improved efficiency, because the more they work on a cell or a conveyor line or a production system, they understand it better, and I think they deliver higher productivity. So that brings more to the table in terms of value and in terms of margins in those particular cells or production systems.
So we have 2 more questions coming up. The first one is again, Ajit, you are popular, so the question is for you. What advice would you give to young engineering graduates going into the workforce post-pandemic?
Well, whether it is post-pandemic or now, engineering graduates are certainly in need. In fact, we have operations out of Detroit. We have a tech center. We have operations out of Wichita in Kansas, in places like Juarez and Matamoros in Mexico. We hire a lot of engineers. I think they are the starting pillars of we are from an auto component industry. We are a manufacturing output. Engineers are like pillars of our organization. I don't know, probably we have about 1,000 engineers all over the world, whether diploma or full-fledged engineers. And they are truly the building block of the company like ours. So my advice is that when you enter a workforce, there is a lot to learn. I think what we learn in the university is more theoretical, more ability to make the student understand how to take rational decisions, take certain assumptions into place, and come to some, hopefully optimal solutions. But ultimately, the proof of pudding is in eating, as they say, is to understand practically how it is. I can easily say that today, as I said, that how it was great to have somebody like Eldon, and the experience in tons has stood the test of time for me. But if you ask me what else, Pemberton was there, he has also studied the same subjects. Whether it's an optimization or whether it is stochastic processes, I don't remember a damn thing there that I learned, honestly. But then what I learned was how to take rational decisions, and then, practically understand what it means in a working scenario. I think it's important for the students to take what they learned in the classroom and see how it makes them to implement in the shop floor or in operating environment, and learn from those experiences and build their career. Because engineering is a fantastic grounding to make youngsters to grow, in particular in the manufacturing or in even in the other IT or related businesses. So there's a lot to learn as we grow, and I think it's important to dirty your hands when you start working and learn as much as you can, so that you can grow your career as you progress.
Ajit, it's been said that it's kind of a bit of a tongue-in-cheek statement, but it also has a serious tone to it, and that it's been said that university education cannot hurt you as long as you're willing to learn something afterwards.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
There's a lot of wisdom in that. That you're absolutely right. I mean, many of the things that we learned in the classroom, I'm the same way. I would not remember the details of those anymore. But the big lesson that has stayed with me, and I think it stays with most people, is that education is about learning how to learn. It's about learning how to think critically. It's learning how to solve problems. And as long as you learn the basics of those, you will be able to apply that knowledge that you learned in new situations long after the original knowledge is forgotten. And of course, along with that, your ability to communicate, ability to build networks, ability to find the common ground with others, and so on. Those are important skills as well. But strictly speaking, on the stuff you learn in the classroom, you can take it forward all your life. And I would add to that something that you said earlier on. I just simply want to remind our students that I can't leave my professorial hat behind when I'm in these meetings. Your statement, Johnny Walker, keep walking. Right? Pandemic is almost over, but keep walking. Yes, I think our students have been scarred quite significantly during this experience. It's not been the same experience that it would have been without the pandemic, but still, I think most students have still gotten a good quality education. It's not the same that it would have been without pandemic, and it will still serve you well. And now it is the time to put the pedal to the floor and keep going and build on what you've learned, because better times do lie ahead, and they will come.
Yes, and absolutely. I agree with you 100% on that, Deep. Yes.
So keep walking with Johnny Walker.
Next time when I also hold the little glass with me with the Johnny Walker as well.
Well, make sure you don't hold too many of those glasses, or you will be staggering rather than walking. So we have one more question. We have just been joined by Elizabeth, who was supposed to join us in the beginning. Elizabeth is another alumna from Dalhousie. Elizabeth, welcome. Can we see you on the screen, please?
Do I get on? There we are.
Oh, there you go. Elizabeth is a Dalhousie alumna who has done remarkable things in oil and gas sector in Kenya. She's based in Kenya, but has had international experience. She is the founder and chief executive officer of Savo Oilfield Services in Kenya. Did I pronounce it right, Elizabeth?
Yes, you did. Thank you very much, sir.
It is so wonderful to see you. And I'm sorry that you were stranded somewhere else and were not able to join us early. So listen, we're going to pivot very quickly. We still have a few minutes before this conversation ends. And I'm going to pose a question to you. Share with us what have been maybe one or two top lessons that you've learned through the pandemic that you would like to share with others. And these are lessons in leadership that could be useful to the wider audience here.
First of all, let me thank you very much for allowing me in. I'm in Lagos, Nigeria, just come out of a big conference on oil and gas that involved over 15 countries. I was here representing my company, Savo Oilfield Services, as well as the people from Kenya. And unfortunately, we had issues with internet blackouts, so I really apologize. Well, the lessons I learned in the pandemic is just keep on going. And that's exactly what I did. I never let the pandemic, slow me down. As I said, I started my company in 2017 when the oil and gas prices were completely on the floor. I came from Weatherford, where I was regional head for the East Africa operations between Ethiopia, and all the way down to Mozambique. I was the first female in Sub-Sahara to hold this position. I decided to start my company because I realized there was much more to do in this part of the world. And basically resilience. And when oil and gas wasn't there, I had to look for some other energy sector, and I entered into the geothermal. Kenya is the largest geothermal producer in Africa, and I think we're number 8 or 9 in the world. And they drill. They use big rigs, 2,000 hydraulic horsepower rigs. So I just translated what I knew from oil and gas into the geothermal. I'm now entering into the power sector as well, and looking at mining. And what I've also done is that I mentor a lot of young petroleum engineers. So I provided them a forum where they see they have real experience, things that I did not see when I started my career. And mainly in America. I was educated, as you know, at Dalhousie, a fantastic co-op program, and that was enabled me to get into a very good company in the US, BJ Services, where I started my career, starting onshore, and then I went offshore, rose all the way to region engineer, stayed in Aberdeen, worked Africa, and eventually ended up in Kenya, where I am here now. So the lessons for me is keep on going, look for partnerships, strategic partnerships. I use this time people will now listen to you. There's not much going on. So I use this time to build very strong networks. When projects are there, now I'm able to tap into this network that I've been able to get into.
This is very interesting. Ajit, you and I were talking about Johnny Walker. So I think the Johnny Walker principle has become the next chapter in the new, whatever the new management book is.
There is a consensus on that.
Consensus on keep walking, yeah. And so we will call it, when we write when 3 of us get together and write the management book, this would be a chapter on it. It would be titled The Johnny Walker Principle. And so
exactly.
Now we have.
And I just wanted to say, I know you don't have a lot of time. I just wanted to say the conference I came out of, we were talking about women in industry. I want you to know that it's very exciting, especially seeing African women that are tackling this energy sector, very tough environment. So we want to, I'm encouraging women and encouraging myself, as we say, and also with Ajit. I hope that we can partner in some stuff in Eastern Africa. This is now we're in a village. We can go anywhere these days. But I will thank the good education I got in Canada. That has opened up a lot of doors for me.
And Elizabeth, we are so proud of what you have accomplished and what you have, the impact that you've had, and your latest impact on developing new platforms, the more sustainable platforms for energy, as well as the work you do to support women in leadership roles. We are so proud of the work you're doing. Unfortunately, we are right at the end of the time, and I don't want to keep our people waiting. So I would simply say, first, I'll say thanks to the 2 of you for joining us. Thanks for everything you do in your professional spheres and outside the professional spheres for the society. You are shining stars who have come out of Dalhousie, and we're so very proud of you. I also want to turn to our audience and say thank you so much to everybody for finding this time to be with us today. I do hope that you have found some of this conversation useful, and I do hope also that we will stay connected. There will be opportunities now, hopefully soon, for us to meet, and I am going to go on a world tour to meet our 150,000 alumni, and I'm determined to meet every one of them. Even if I don't succeed, I have to keep walking. So thank you, everybody. You have a wonderful day, and hopefully we'll meet again.
Yeah. Welcome to Kenya.
Thank you, Deep. It was wonderful meeting you. Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you all the team for a wonderful time we had today. Thank you, and have a good day.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.